So hi, I'm Blake,
I'm Zach.
I'm Chris.
and this is
OnlyBands.
OnlyBands.
That was pretty good. Hey,
That was actually really good.
I think we
Wow.
got that one.
So today we have a special guest on the podcast. His name is Chris. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself, your music, etc.?
Sure. My name's Chris Matthews. I play in the band called Quiz Show, which is out of Montclair, New Jersey. And I am getting back into music after a couple of decades of taking off and doing other things. But I was originally in the band called Shudder to Think out of Washington, D.C. And the Discord label back when I was probably the same age as Blake and Zach. So those are my creds.
So you made a bit of a leap there then.
I did.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Can you so I actually I'm not sure if I don't remember if I went over this in our email exchange, but we do talk mostly about the mental health aspect of making music and stuff like that. Can you tell us a little bit about how like that leap in location has affected the music aspect of your life?
Well, sure. It's actually an excellent question. So back when I was in Shudder to Think as a youngster, and I was in the band through when I went to college, and then as all sort of early 20-year-olds do, you kind of wake up one day and you say, what am I going to do when I'm a grown-up? Because I'm not a grown-up yet, and I've resisted growing up, so I'm not gonna. I didn't know what the answer was, and so it took a lot of soul searching to figure that out. Shudder to Think was we were a pretty successful band, but I would say that most people know Shudder to Think from the time after I was in the band because they became more successful. But I think what I thought of was I don't know if I have, honestly, the mental strength to grow up in the music world. The precarity of it, the insecurity of it, the imposter-ness of it. Am I any good at this at all?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was already thinking about going to graduate school in anthropology, which is what I ended up doing. It's what I majored in. My mom jokes that I only got to the letter A in the course catalog and stopped. So, and she might be right. I don't know. But the point is, I enjoyed it, and so I applied to graduate school and then got in places to my surprise, and I was like, I got to choose one or the other, and so I chose the graduate school thing because of, I think, just a little bit of too much insecurity, too much I don't think I have a musician's life in me, but that didn't mean I didn't have music in me, right? There's a big difference. Mm-hmm. And anybody can play music at any time. And so I chose something that was marginally more secure. I'm an anthropologist. I'm actually specifically an archaeologist, which sounds really cool, but the job market for our folks like us is slim and tricky. But I've been lucky with a lot of good fortune and maybe some intelligence behind it that I've been able to succeed. Such that I am now a full professor of anthropology at Montclair State University, and I'm sitting in my office with a lame ass background. Sorry.
That's pretty amazing.
But after we're done, I have to teach. So I chose something that was definitely more secure, but I've also, and I kind of didn't really play music for a while, and then I ended up in Montclair, New Jersey because of this job, and I'm outside of New York City, and a lot of folks in the music world, some of whom I've known well or known of, have sort of migrated to Montclair. It's sort of a destination for arts and media people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so there's a music scene here, and through various friends I've met just from, living in town. I have children, you meet people through also being parents, which is a strange way to get to know people, but
fair, yeah.
but I found some really great musicians, and one of whom popped up out of nowhere is this guy, Kevin March, who was the last drummer in Shudder to Think on the 50,000 BC record. And then he toured with them a bunch. And we kind of asked, are you the Chris Matthews from Shudder to Think? And I was like, are you the Kevin March from Shudder to Think? And, you know, because it's just by email. And like we were both on an email list, you know, especially my name is not so distinctive. So I got back, I wrote back and we met in person and then started playing music together. And that's after some sort of this, that, and the other thing, we started writing songs together and created what's become Quiz Show. Kevin was the drummer on all of the songs up until the last release. He's still around, he's just busy. Kevin is a professional musician. He is the drummer for Guided by Voices right now. So he's got a real career in the business. He's also the general manager of the School of Rock in Montclair. So he's incredibly busy. Yeah, yeah. So, you know, he kind of dragged me back in, not unwillingly, but he made it sound like it was feasible to kind of throw music back into my sort of everyday life. And it's been fantastic, you know, to be able to bring that out after really 20 years of not playing much at all. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. So
and that, like, just that very story could just be really, honestly, like, inspiring to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because like I personally, like, I stepped away from music for like a good like 2-year period. And like even after that, like I'm still, you know, like I'm still a kid. And like even after that, I felt weird like coming back to it. I'm like, is it even worth it? Like, is it even like, is there a point in trying at that point? But no, like that's awesome, man.
Yeah, that's truly incredible. So you mentioned how you ended up coming to Montclair, and there's a great music scene in New Jersey, as both me and Zach know. Can you tell us a little bit about how the pandemic has kind of impacted y'all in that aspect? Because I know the music scene has been kind of interesting since that.
Well, yeah, I guess so. You know, really what happened is that everything had to stop, and including band practice, right? No one's got, and you know, it was the part of the pandemic that at least me and some other people I've spoken to forget about is we used to think it was going to be over in a few weeks, and then it'll just be another few weeks, and then just another few weeks. And, you know, to the best of anyone's knowledge, that was what was going to happen. And so everyone was kind of hoping and say, okay, let's just, you know, figure it out when it comes back. And then next thing you know, it's over a year later, and we're just kind of figuring that out now. And it's just been really, it's been kind of like strange to live in that way, right? You know, as a professor, it kind of would transition pretty easily for me because I just start teaching like we're meeting now on Zoom. It's not ideal, it's terrible for teaching, but it's possible. And I never even wanted to try like playing music, which I know there are software programs that allow like that compensate for lag or something where you could play safely, but that just seemed far-fetched to me. It's just music is something you have to be there with someone. I agree. Really not much happened, except somehow before the pandemic, I had written a handful of songs, and a guy who's no longer playing with us because he decided during the pandemic he just didn't have time for it anymore, but he's a musician and a film editor, so he had some great equipment at home. So we were able to record live guitars and live vocals with drums and bass through his, you know, machines and create some pretty nice demos. And that was right before everything shut down, or it was maybe it was like the December before. And it was, the plan was that would be the demos for the next set of recordings, and that's what it ended up being. So the drummer Joe Billy and the bass player Jesse Krakow, who were on the recent release called Geographic, I was able to just share those with them, and they were able to learn the songs and write this and figure out parts for themselves, so that when we recorded that EP, we'd never practiced. We never were in the room together. we didn't have I trusted them. They're professionals, especially compared to me. And I was like, do we need to practice? And they were kind of like, for safety's sake, no, I think we can pull it off. And
that's impressive.
Came out the way it came. I don't think anyone would ever know.
Wow.
But yeah, just like, that, and obviously fabulous engineering by Ray Ketchum at Magic Door Studios, and all that. Just, it's been, that was quite an amazing process. I hope we don't have to do it again, but at the same time, we have our very first show coming up on Saturday at a distillery in Fairfield, New Jersey. And we're going to practice Friday.
Okay.
and put it together. So we'll see,
Yeah. What's
so definitely the pandemic has played a role in that way.
Are that how's that show organized right now?
It's an outdoor show at a place called the Claremont Distillery. Like, they make booze, and I think it's in like a warehouse area, but somehow they have an outdoor space. I've never been, so I don't know how it really works, but I've seen pictures, and you're playing on a concrete pad with a bunch of whiskey barrels behind you.
That sounds pretty awesome. You know what?
I think the guy who's organizing it was a friend of Joe Billy. He looks like he's kind of a metalhead. So I gather that's the typical bands that are playing there. But actually, I've seen a couple other things. I think he's just bringing in everything. So yeah, it's just this guy who convinced the distillery, let's do this. And so, I gather there's a bar, so they can.
Yeah, we could hope.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That sounds totally cool. Wow.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because you're a professor, and that's obviously a very work intensive profession at the end of the day. How do you balance the two?
Well, I have to give a ton of credit to the people at home. I'm married. I have 2 teenage kids, and they are nothing but supportive, especially my wife. The kids are kids. You can't ask much more than they get, but my wife is incredibly supportive of this. She's really pleased that I put this back into my life. She knew it was important to me. I didn't meet her until after I sort of give it up on music. But she knew it was important. She knew this was part of my life, and so there's never been any like friction at home about trying to make this work. And the advantage of being a professor is, while it is very, there's a lot of work, there's always a lot of work between teaching, research, and, serving on committees to help universities and organizations run. It's a lot of flexibility. So the trick that we figured out with Quiz Show is that we would practice at 9:15 in the morning at the School of Rock before it opened for 45 minutes. And we wrote everything in that process over the last few years. And that worked out well, because then I could go, either back home, work in my home office, or come in and teach afterwards, and that just kind of fit the schedule. And so it's a matter of having that flexibility that's really great, and it's a wonderful. It's probably the best part of being a college professor is there's a lot of autonomy. We have bosses, of course, but we don't have somebody who's breathing down our neck, as long as we actually teach the courses they sign us up to teach. So.
Yeah, that's important for sure.
So
I had a follow-up question, and I forget what it was.
Love that. So how would you describe your music in 5 words or less?
That's really
boy.
All right, I'll preface that by saying I've never really liked describing my own music. I'm always confused by whatever people
say. Yep, yeah. We get that response a lot.
I like loud. I like kind of post-punk, post-punk, interesting. A word that came up recently was striving. And then I get one more word.
Good.
I was just about to say guitars, like
Guitars.
it's really a guitar band. It's always been guitar band. So yeah.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I know. I
That was
think I know what you
hard,
mean
but
by
I
that.
appreciate the question.
Yeah. No, we
Yeah.
actually get that response a lot where it's just like, oh, I hate describing my own music.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to
Yeah.
do. Like you don't want to make assumptions about what other people think about it because you're the one making it. And you also don't want to like kind of corner yourself into like one area.
And I'm
I
also
did,
not the kind of
however,
musician that I can't like go do another kind of music, I'm not like,
yeah,
like,
that's
and
fair.
so I'm like,
Yeah.
There is a strength to that though.
Well, yeah, well, it's just, that's what I mean by the striving. I just really want it to be, I know what I'm trying to get to, and it's a striving to try and reach it. Whether I get there, I don't know. And I can listen to a song and love it, and then tomorrow I'll be like, oh, it didn't get there, but it's definitely, so I like to push what I'm trying to get to. I like to push what I'm doing to reach beyond what it just is. I'm not, rather than just fall. I always start with the guitar, so rather than just let my hands do whatever they're going to do, I ask them to do things that I'm not expecting them to do when I first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sure. I did, however, remember what I was going to say, because as soon as as you said, punk, post-punk, I was like, oh right, like, how does it feel to have so many similarities to the lead singer of Bad Religion?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, and there are other similar. I mean, I assume that's the college professor similarity, right? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's
the one thing I always think of when I think of him, because it's just such an impressive extra fact to me.
Yeah, and then there's isn't it Milo from the Descendants is also a professor? Like there was an article.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, because otherwise I'm not sure what other similarities I have with him. But yeah, it's like I said, it's a great job, and it's really teaching is an amazing profession. Research is an amazing profession, and I do both. It's great to be able to share what I do in research or what my field does for research with students and tell them why it's important and watch them kind of at least agree a little bit, if not a lot, occasionally, that it's really like, hey, we really should have this in our world. Because I do a very kind of humanities kind of thing, which is constantly under fire because no one who studies what I study is gonna make $1 billion. We're doing it to go out and do something interesting and challenging. And my focus is mostly on race and using archaeology to write alternative narratives about spaces like Northern New Jersey, where nobody knows slavery happened, but it was an everyday, common, always event throughout the colonial and early American period. And they don't want to talk about it. Even today, people don't want to talk about it, even though really today, and a conversation with someone who's trying to get a historical society one town over from me, I'm nodding in the direction, where the town just doesn't want to deal with the fact that their founders were slaveholders. They won't even, they basically said that was before our town. We're like, you don't get to make that distinction.
Yeah, it's like that's not what matters. It's the fact that it happened. Like you can't just so much as acknowledge that. And
and they love their historic buildings from that era. This was Dutch colonial in the first part of the colonial stuff, and so these 18th century beautiful structures that were built, but they're basically built to be the homes of the Dutch colonists and their enslaved Africans. You can see it in the architecture, but they don't want to talk about it. That sounds scary.
No, of course not. I mean, that's going to be a common theme that you're going to find in Montclair, honestly, that people just don't want to talk about things.
That's a very Montclair vibe.
Yeah, well, because there's a very famous venue, a really famous punk venue down by you. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, the Meat Locker.
Yep.
Oh my God. That is one of the most historical venues in
It is
all
the
of New
most
Jersey.
historical venue. And so My Chemical Romance is played there, Set It Off is played there. The vast majority of Streetlight Manifesto is played there. Like the vast majority of like not just New
Mhm.
Jersey bands, but like any like nationally touring
Mhm.
smaller bands that blew up, they have all played the Meat Locker. And
Yeah.
I did not
it's
know that. That's
changed.
great. Yeah.
It is a different venue than it was 100%, but
Mhm.
it's still there, and that's what matters. It's
Right,
just like
right,
the
right.
the basement of some it's the basement of a restaurant that is now separately owned from the restaurant.
Right.
And
No,
It's
I know what it is. I did not know it
it's
had such a deep
no
history.
yeah,
It's fascinating.
I'm just saying because like a lot of people don't like recognize it, but like yeah, you'll find like, oh, Hannibal Buress visited it. I don't know if you know who that is, but yeah, he's a comedian, and he's one of the co-hosts of the Eric Andre show. And there was like a video like after one of his comedy tours, he just walks in and they just let him in. And he just walks down into the basement, and he's just like, huh. And he just opens a door, and there's just some hardcore band practicing.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
they just look at him, and he's like, he just looks at the camera, like he gives it one of these. He goes, like a worried, like, what the fuck is going on here? Which is great because the band was just as confused to see Hannibal Buress.
Sure. Yeah.
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 But yeah, no, you're in a great area
Uh,
for the arts, especially in New
Mhm.
Jersey.
yeah.
Bar none the pandemic,
Right. Right.
but still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your process in general? Like, I know you mentioned it was
Blake, you're really breaking up. I'm not hearing you very
Yeah.
well.
Oh, this is the technical difficulty song. Technical difficulty song. We're hanging in the room, waiting for my boss. He's moving again.
testing.
Uh,
Testing.
did I revive you? Yeah, I think I got you.
That was an incredible song.
You still
God.
oh no. I heard a no rip. Everything's moving again.
This is technical difficulty song.
Hey, no, you're back. You're back. You're good.
So sorry
That's pretty good
about
freeze
that.
frame right there.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that your writing process has been a little compromised lately, and that you've had to record kind of separately. How would your idealized writing process look like?
Oh, good question. So I'm good at playing guitar. So I start with the guitar every time. And it's usually I just start with an acoustic guitar that sits in my home office, and I just sit around and turn away from work and play guitar. And if something interesting comes up, the world's greatest invention since before time, when I was, in the 90s, is that now I can put my iPhone on and do an immediate recording. I can't tell you how many times I lost great song ideas because I figured out what it is, like went to get a drink of water, came back, and I could put my hands right there, but the song was gone,
Yep. Yeah.
And that never
Yeah.
happened. Well, it's not that it never happens again, but it's great that that I could just be like, I know better. I'm like, okay, record, then go get a drink of water. But yeah, and then I just record them, and then I listen to them, and I figure out which ones sound like they have some promise. And then what I'll do, what we did traditionally is that I would go and like meet Kevin at 9:15 in the morning, and I would play him my line, and he would just sit and listen to it. And this is his talent. He would be like, okay, I hear something, just keep going, keep going, keep going. And then it would sort of be guitar, and then with drums. A guy named Frank Gibbons was the bass player when we started. And so he would kind of come in and pick that up. We would make a new voice recording or voice memo, and then we would figure out something at home where there was a bass part, and then all of a sudden it was a song. The vocals would always kind of come last, and I learned from Craig Wedren and started to think that you start with the melody rather than the words, because the trying to make words fit into a melody is a lot more difficult than having a melody and just finding some words that will sing that through. And I'd never sang before in a band, and I'd never written lyrics before quiz show started. And so it was really intimidating, but it was another reason I put it off towards the end. But that's what happened. And so I come up with a melody. Sometimes the melody comes with the guitar, but oftentimes it doesn't. Oftentimes I would just wait until the drum, bass, guitar was all sort of sorted out, and then come up with a melody, then write some lyrics that may or may not be any good. I have no idea, but they would work one way or another. And then it's ready to be recorded. And we would record, usually we would record as fast as we could, and we would record 1 or 2 songs at a time rather than setting up for a whole bunch at once, just because we didn't know, our experiences, we don't know how, are we going to be able to practice next week or next month? We don't know. And so we just kind of take the windows we have, we go in. The studio is also in Montclair, so it's literally just down the road. Ray, who I mentioned before, is kind of in the alternative post-punks tradition as a musician. He plays in a band called Elk City, so he knew what we were doing, and he and Kevin do a lot of work together. Kevin actually, like I mentioned, lives in Montclair, and while Guided by Voices is based really in Ohio, they record wherever they record, including Kevin will record the drums at Ray's place, and then somehow it all gets mixed into an album because none of the other instruments or vocals are recorded at Ray's. So it's just all done in this fascinating remote process. And so we would just do it like that. And then in the studio, I would, maybe there was a harmony, or maybe there were second guitar parts. Usually there were second guitar parts, and that would finalize it. And so it's kind of got a straight line, and it kind of always has worked that way. And that's kind of how it worked with Started to Think when I was in the band. I was kind of I've got a guitar line, let's make a song. Which is
absolutely.
So I guess that's it.
Having a jumping off point is definitely the absolute
foundation
of any song.
I've never been great at like just sitting down with some people to play. I have one memory where I was playing with some talented musicians in Washington. That a friend of mine said, "Why don't you come play with us?" And I went and played, and I was like, I can't. What are we doing? I can't write a song like this. We need to let me come up with something, and I'll come back. And then we never did. But I was like, I can't just sit here and bang it out. And I suppose other people, that's how they do it. They just jam their way into something. It probably comes out really well.
I deeply envy those people, because I'm the same exact way. Like I can't just reach into the ether and just pull something out, it's got to come to me type thing. And it's just, I can't keep up with those people either. They're just like, I'm working with somebody right now on like a collab project, and he's just like, he'll just like really space cadet for a second, just like kind of completely like shift into his own world. And I'll just kind of sit there for like a couple seconds and just wait. And then he's like, okay, check this out. And then like half the song is done. I'm like, what? Where did this come from? And he's just like, I don't know. I thought about it.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the hard part. That's like asking, like, what is your music like? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a radio show up here, there's a station called Bone Pool Radio in Maplewood. And they have a radio show called Under the Influence. And they've asked me twice, because they want to play a quiz show song, but they want to pair it with the song that was influencing me when I wrote that song. And I'm like, I don't know. So I've always had to ask other people, like, give me something you think would be a good match. And that's what I did. So like the last
that's honestly good though. Like,
yeah,
that's a good, because I take like way too much influence from things around me, like to a point where I'm afraid at some points that I'm copying them.
Yeah.
And like, of course, like that's never the objective. That's never something that you want to do in music. But like, I'll take a step back and I'll like realize, oh, that sounds a little bit too much like an all-time low song,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that's never a good thing, but it's
No.
also an unavoidable thing in some situations. So
Oh,
it's good that
absolutely
like
avoidable.
it's
Yeah.
good that it's very good that you can't like
When
really
you
pin
decide
one
something
down.
you're writing is good, it's always susceptible to being, because it sounds like what you like. in other
Yeah,
bands.
absolutely. Yeah,
And
exactly.
you're just sort of
Yeah.
like, and it's hard, even sometimes hard to notice it. And you're like, but that's good.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
oh
like
my God,
that's the other
Yeah.
thing. Like it might not even be intentional and it might just be completely like psychosomatic that you're just like finding these connections. But like
right.
at the end of the day, if you like it, then it's because it's good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I take way too much influence from some of my bands,
Mhm.
my favorite bands. Yeah.
Mhm.
Actually, I sat
So-
down at a sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but yeah, please keep that in mind because this is gonna be short. So I one time I sat down at like a little like a writing seminar with this musician, the Ready Set, and he's one of my favorites. And yeah, it was like at Warped Tour, like you could like pay to like go and chill, and then he would teach you a few things. And he was saying like some people like they'll just find a song they like, completely copy it, and then work backwards from there and change it, and it'll become an entirely new thing. And it's like he was just like, yeah, I could never do it like that, but I mean, I know a lot of people that do, and he never specified. But like it's weird how like there are just so many different ways to do this thing that we think is so concrete.
Mm-hmm.
I know. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I'm still amazed that we haven't run out of songs to write. And I know that's
Yeah,
an
I think that a
impossibility.
lot.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
like, how have we not written everything by now? I mean, when you look at like, there's not that many notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yet it's infinite. It's a little bit of a stupid comment, but like at the same time, I'm like, geez.
No,
it's
no,
never
I'm
ending.
completely with you because I've always thought the same.
That's funny. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I have a very important question for you.
Oh boy.
If you could be any animal in the world, extinct or alive, and you could do anything you want for 24 hours with no repercussions, what animal would you be and why? Also, what would you do?
Yeah. You know what? It's not as hard as I thought it would be. I saw a picture recently of a blue whale, and I think it would be a blue whale. They're maybe twice as big as I thought they were. They're the biggest animal that's ever been on the planet. They're bigger than any dinosaur. And I think I knew that, but there was a picture of one, like it was like the whale was underwater, and on top of the water was a boat, like a research boat, like, and probably like a typical like motorboat that you'd have for like water skiing or something like that. So the scale was, a tiny little boat and this massive whale that was under them, and not like in any way causing any danger. They didn't seem to be the point. It was more just to show you how big this thing was. And
Yeah,
it
of
was
course.
so long
Yeah.
and sleek. And you know what it does all the day? It just swims around. And it travels the earth and does what it wants. And I assume there's no predators, so it's probably a really peaceful existence. Gulping down microscopic, what do they call that? Plankton, and
Yeah, krill.
Yeah.
yeah, and just that would be a great way to spend a day.
Yeah, that's a much more peaceful answer than anyone that I've ever given.
Yeah.
Well, when you first thought it and said it could be alive or not, I was going to go with saber-toothed tiger because they're cool. But that picture, I was like, that whale looks pretty awesome.
I'll usually my answer to that question changes pretty much every single time that I'm on here, and I forget. I think it was dragon was the last thing that I said because you said that was allowed.
Yeah.
Because I was like, dude, I'm just gonna terrorize a village for a day. Like none of
Sounds like
their
fun,
livestock,
too.
none of their livestock and sheep are safe. That part in fucking Game of Thrones where Dracarys is just burning sheep
Sure.
at a village. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
I can already see it.
Uh-huh.
I think it's a tiger at some point.
Yeah.
I forget. I can't think of a funny one this time though. So
You don't need to be funny all the time.
yes, I do. What do you thought? I'm hilarious. It's my entire thing. No, Blake, I'm your hero.
No. Okay.
You guys are fun.
We try to be.
We got a chemistry going on.
Good.
A little bit. So if you could sit with 5 other people for dinner and they could be alive or dead and you could just chat to them for that dinner, what 5 people would you pick?
Frederick Douglass.
This is probably the best question to ask anthropology professor.
Yeah. I deal with people all the time, so I'm trying to focus on probably Ian Mackay. How about cheesy version? It's not cheesy, but Gandhi, as I definitely have some questions for him.
Yeah. Get to the bottom of some things with that guy.
Yeah. And then how about like someone else in music, like let's say like Joan Jett, and then let's try and pick some other kind of career that's interesting. It was living or dead, right? But they have to be a real person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think I'll put in my one of the people who inspires me a lot in my work. It's Mindy Fully Love, and I can tell you who she is if you're looking for it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
So Mindy is a psychiatrist, but her work is on urban communities, and she is a collaborator I've worked with in a project in the town next to Montclair called Orange, which is a urban majority minority community. And her work, she works on lots of different projects, but she's always been interested in sort of reconstructing the positive narratives that places like Orange, which are dominated by negative narratives, and the negative outweighs the positive or overshadows or eliminates. And so it's the kind of place where, it's like one simple way of saying it, she's very much anti-gentrification, because, gentrification is bad, but it's also, it's not just the replacement of people, it's the loss of such vital things, which is how do people live in poorly resourced, sort of stigmatized communities, and how do they find joy, which is one of her words. And I think everybody wants joy. So, and joy it's a really important word. It's not just happiness. There's something different about joy, and whatever that is, it's like a really good thing to focus on. So that's why I would put her at the table. I think we would all learn a ton from Frederick Douglass. He was probably the smartest person in the 19th century. I can't even remember how Joan Jett and Ian Mackay. I would just listen to them talk about growing up outside of DC in the 70s and the 80s, and let them talk about that and be music people. So, who else did I say? Gandhi.
Yeah.
Gandhi.
Yes, a complicated person, obviously. And, but just to have, I just thought we need somebody who can kind of speak everyone else is American and he was not, even though he was basically as British as he was Indian. I don't know. I think it would make for a fascinating conversation, and I actually only regret because somehow you expect me to be at the table, which would be terrifying. So maybe I don't have to be at the table.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's
I can be the waiter.
Yeah. My answer would probably be like a bunch of really strong, scary, angry people, and then one person that I don't like. Just to see what happens.
Okay.
And
so we got
to be okay, and you would be at that table. That is, I love it.
I definitely like his answer a lot more, but I mean, you can't really expect much different from a literal college professor asking a question like that.
That is fair. That is fair.
So it looks like we're running low on time here, but there is a question that I usually like to ask people toward the end of the podcast. If I get the chance, and it is, if you had to describe the message that you want to give to the world with your music, with anything that you do, what would it be?
So through the music is, it's not my lyrics. There's something about the narrative. I think maybe the narrative I would highlight with my band right now is how the things we get to do that really make us happy are things that we cannot predict are going to do that. You can't. I think I was really, really lucky to be in Shudder to Think when I was younger, because it gave me something that someone like Kevin March would be like, oh, I know who you are. I don't think I could have done that without that. But that aside, I think the idea of like being able to just accidentally run into him and accidentally create a band that accidentally brought me out of not playing music into playing music again. It freed up any, I wasn't trying to do it, so I had no expectations. I could not fail, because I'm not accomplished. I'm not trying to get to something. That's not entirely true. I want songs to be good. I want the chance to play them and all that. Failures, there's lots of ways you cannot succeed like that, but I've never felt like that. And so it's that accidental quality that I think is so essential. And maybe that comes through the music in any way, I'd be really pleased. And I can perhaps take that thought with me, and next thing I write, I can think about it more consciously like that. See if I can achieve that. Yeah. So anyway, so thank you for posing the question. It's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah, that's honestly just the idea of how that would come to fruition in any form of tangible medium. That sounds really, really interesting, because it affects, that idea affects everybody. Again, I took 2 years away from music, and I came back to it because I just so happened to run into my current guitarist, and he just so happened to know a drummer that wanted to get into music, and then he just so happened to start working with a guy who wanted to get into music and knew a bassist, and it was like, okay, well, that took a week.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's
I think there's something really cool to that, right? It's like bands that form that way, as opposed to some sort of preconception. That's basically how Shudder to Think formed. Is that I knew Stuart, the bass player, because we worked at an ice cream store together. We were both in bands, but we were I knew that. And then Craig went to my high school, and the drummer in that band that Stu was in was Mike, and that was the 4 of us. And we just kind of, morphed into something, and then morphed into Shudder to Think when we decided to change the name or become something new or whatever it was at the moment. But yeah,
absolutely,
yeah. That's how it works. You need musicians, and you don't know how you're gonna find them.
Musicians are definitely because it's not just playing music. Right. To be a musician is more to it than that, and they're a rare breed.
But Musicians are so much more. They're a community. They're a person.
Mhm.
They're like
A movement.
a movement. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
great.
I agree. That's powerful too.
And it's always
Yeah.
great to know that that's something that you can be a part of, you know, like
Yeah.
no matter what you do, and whether it's playing music, whether it's supporting it, like it's just it's a beautiful feeling to know that there's something bigger than you that you can be a part of.
Right.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Well, on that beautiful yet melancholy note,
On that wonderful way to end the podcast, I am Blake.
Absolutely. I'm Zach.
I'm Chris.
And this was
OnlyBands.
Did I beat you guys?
And I say geography.